We're going to go through the Aspire with a focus on plasma cutting today. So we're going to create a new file. And we want to set up settings. We're going to do our datum point as the bottom left corner in this case. That's where we pull all dimensions off of where 0, 0 is. So round stock or easily finding the center of something by going corner to corner. You might want to use a center datum, but if you're going to run a big sheet of material, it might be easiest to have the bottom left corner as the middle of your part, and then it'll run for the whole distance. Our plasma cutter is 48 by 48, but you're rarely ever going to be able to have full cut capacity of that, with 0, 0 being kind of hard to get to. So we usually try to stay underneath that. Let's go with 44, and this time let's do 24 in width, and let's go with 44 in length. We only want to have a single side. The thickness of our material, it doesn't matter so much in this program, because when we're plasma cutting it, we bring it to a different program called SheetCam that we do all of our settings in. But I guess we can say we're going to cut a 1/4 inch piece of steel with this right off the bat to have a good understanding of what we're doing. If you wanted to change your materials, you could change it down to steel so it has the similar appearance. When I'm happy with that, I click OK. If I ever have to go back and edit that, it is going to be in the job setup over here underneath the file operations. Now, when I'm looking at this, we have a lot of tool sections here, and we're going to be digging into a few of these here. The creation tools of different parts of geometry and text and things like that is here. And then you've got vector modifying here as well to transform it by flipping, mirroring, distorting, centering, and aligning. Things like that are all under transform. And then editing the object. The most common one you're probably going to use is the transferred or transform mode. It often works if you double click on things as well. And we'll go through how you can combine different vectors and trim vectors and add some fillets. And also, if you have some parts when they come in might have some issues of overlap or they didn't really connect, joining it would be like any missing pieces that should connect and aren't. You can also do nesting with multiple pieces. We're going to look at that right away. So if it's efficient use of your material space, you can do an array. So if you have one of something, you can create multiples. You can create multiples in a circular pattern or on a vector. So if you're trying to get different things designed out. So how we're using this today is as a basic 2D CAD program, computer-aided drafting. So we're going to go through the process, but it also can work over here in toolpaths for CAM, for CNC work in the CNC router primarily is how we use that. So we're going to leave that alone for now. Here as well, there's more tabs you can go through to do all kinds of work. We're going to look at layers a little bit and sheets. So I'm going to do a new layer, and I'm going to rename both these layers. If I slow click into it, click once and wait, it should be able to modify. And we're going to call this one the circle cuts. And this one is going to be sign. And then we're going to create one more and call it lettering as well. We're going to make sure we have different colors selected. So the first color, let's do a red. And then the sign, let's do a green, and we'll leave lettering as black. The little light bulb turns on and off things. I'll show this more a little later when we have control of it. And the highest thing up is the top part, which doesn't matter too much for this. Sheets, we could add another sheet. So if we wanted to have, if we have a bunch of pieces of metal that we're going to cut out in a project, we might want to have sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3 that we can modify from. All right, so back into drawing. I'm just going to keep working on sheet 1, and I'm going to make sure I am on circles. That is selected. I'm going to create a circle, and I want this to be a diameter of 2. And I want the X and Y of that location to be 1 and 1. And when I hit enter, it's going to go right by the bottom edge here. So with that diameter of 2, and this being our 0, 0 point, and if I hover there, I can also see 0, 0 is I'm looking at wherever I'm at on the XY axis, which also shows up right down here. So I can do one of those. I'll close. I'm now going to choose that piece. And if I wanted to make a bunch of these, I'm going to use the array tool. And I'm going to go with 6 columns across the X. If you're confused about what X and Y are, you can move this around and see. You can also use that hand trick that I've shown you. So there's column X, there's going to be 6, and rows Y. If we click copy, oh, what happened here? I've got a gap offset. That's something I don't want. So here's where my problem was. This is an old preset I wasn't paying attention to. We can do a gap in between each one. You can also switch to an offset from the beginning. I'm going to go with a gap, and we're going to call the gap a 1/4 inch. We'll do that in the X and Y. And I'm going to hit Control-G to go back, and then also to copy. So that gives us room to work. Now, there's 2 ways we can do things to make it efficient. Oh, this brings up another point. If I drag from left to right and I don't have everything selected, it doesn't select. I'd have to go all the way around it. If I go from right to left, you can select material just by having part of it selected. If I wanted to be efficient, I could move these down. That's probably the easiest way for this. But if I'm doing something more complicated, I can select all of these, and then there's a nest feature. And let's use these presets here. I might do a border gap that's a little smaller. Let's do 0.25. That'll just make sure it gives us some wiggle room. Clearance, tool diameter is going to be pretty small. It's actually 0.06, which is like a 1/16 of an inch. But we're going to have extra clearance on top of it of maybe 0.2. There we go. And it's going to give me the most efficient layout it can find with the material we have. I have it going along the Y-axis, which you might have to change. If we wanted it going up, we could run it that way, and it's just going to run a single path up there. This works really well when you have odd-shaped items. It tries to really figure out how to get the most out of your material with the least amount of waste. Okay, I've got that laid out and set up. I now want to create a rectangle. So I'm going to click on the Create Vectors area here, where it's going to be Draw Rectangle. Look at your anchor point. I'm going to have my anchor point in this one in the bottom left corner, which means whatever number I put in for the X and Y location is going to be there in the bottom left corner. So I'm going to go somewhere around here. I'm going to go with my X location at 4, let's say, and then the Y location at 1. I'm going to make this the size of it. Let's say it's going to be 20 inches. Let's go 22. And the height's going to be 6. Now, at this point, I want square corners, but if you wanted to have a different radius on the corners, you could do that now as well. Okay, so let's look at this. This didn't happen like I wanted to, and it's for one simple reason. I switched my X and Y. So I have to go back. I'm going to hit Control-Z, and I just have to go back and fit my 1 and 4 on the other side. Control-Z is an undo. It's great. Okay, so my math on estimation was wrong there. I probably want to move this up just a little more. Let's go with 5. Perfect. There we go. 1, 5, 22, and 6, and square on the edge. That's giving us an inch on each edge. You want to stay a little away from the edges so you don't make any mistakes. And I also want this to be part of the sign. So right now it's on the circle cuts. I can move to layer, and I'll go into my sign. And that's going to change my color that I have associated with it here as well. If I wanted to hide the circles now and just focus on that, I can. I just turn the light bulb on and off. So now I make sure I'm running in the signs as my current layer. And I'm going to do a 3-point arc. I'm going to make sure it snaps to each endpoint. I'm going to arc up here. If I wanted to change that, I could change my set height to be, maybe I only want it 3.5 up. I could modify that here. It's going to give me a different radius. It's also, so these are alternate versions. You can say how high do you want it to be, or you could change the radius here as well. If I wanted these to be all one part, there's two ways to do it. I can weld them together, and it's going to connect them. I could also use the cut tool. If I do that, I may have to select this and join. And if there's anything that's not working correctly, it'll tell me. And right now it's saying all the vectors are joined, so it can't matter. So we're in good shape there. We have something that'll work well. We're going to put some text in here now. There's two ways to draw text. There's draw text and there's draw text within a vector box. If I have this one here, I can type and it'll keep going forever and ever and ever, you know. If I choose the second text with a vector border, let me do this again. It will stop and rotate back around or shrink, depending on what settings I have set up. But first off, let's just do a simple text here. We'll put it inside of here, and you'll put your name. Okay, we can change the text height if we want. Maybe I want it to be 3 inches. And then the anchor point, I could modify here. We can change the different typefaces to what you might like. But if we're going to make this a sign, let's say I'm going to plasma cut this out and it could drop through, we're going to lose the centers of the A's and all those kinds of things. So we eventually want to modify this. But first, let's get it to the right size. And let's also align these things together. So when I probably could slow down and show you a few more things first. I'm going to align this. If I double click on this, I'm going to use my alignment tool and transform object, and I'm going to center it left and right. Align to material left and right. And that's going to give me a perfect spot because this was 1 inch on each side. If this wasn't that way, I could make sure it was aligned to the material left and right. If I wanted to nudge it up and down, I could still do that here. If I wanted to really modify it, I could double click on this to move it where I need it to. So that's pretty good. That's centered. But if I plasma cut this out, the centers of the R, the center of the A, the center of the D, they're all going to drop into nothing. So I need to make this an editable text. So I'm going to convert this to curves or vectors. It's that T with those little dots. With this now, I can modify each part. The easiest way to do this, I'm going to zoom in, is to drag over some areas here. I'll come back and modify these to make them look a little nicer. And on some of them, you might want to go top and bottom. There we go. I might use this edit node feature now if I wanted to modify it in real detail. Let's say I wanted this R, looks like it might plasma cut into nothing. I can edit that node to be a little smoother. It might give me a little more thickness. Now it's not so smooth, so I should spend a little more time monkeying around with some of these handles. So thicker will make sure it plasma cuts nicely. Right now, all those things are going to drop into nothing. So I'm probably going to want to go through and attach to this because the R is going to disappear away. I might even copy and paste so we have consistent sizes of things. I'll move that one up. There we go. Now I'm going to use the interactive trim, not to be confused with cut, which is like copy, paste, or cut, Control X, that removes or takes out a whole thing that you could paste somewhere else. We're going to use this edit object, scissors. If I zoom in now, I can trim away aspects here. That'll make sure that this becomes part of the rest of the object. There we go. So that's going to stay. It looks like an old school stencil. It's the same concept here. And if you're too zoomed out, you'll cut too much of it. So I got to zoom in a little more. Every time you see a yellow dot, it's me clicking. And I want to modify this one before I trim it because it's too big right now. I'm going to use my move modify tool on the bounding box. That looks better. Okay, so that would be ready to plasma cut out now. I'm going to move on to lettering for this one, and I can hide that as well. So for lettering, there's a few different ways we can modify text on some shapes. Actually, I should bring this one back. We're going to do a 3-point arc. And this line that pops up, this dashed line, is a reference line saying I've got it at an angle. I'm going to roughly get a similar layout. I'm also going to take basic text and type in test 2. Keep all the same settings. If I want to right justified or left justified, that's where I can modify it here, but I'll keep it center. And I can move this around by double clicking or clicking twice slow. I really don't need to get it to wrap on this surface here. I'm going to select them both. And then I'm going to use the text on curve. If I don't have both a vector shape and a text, I can't use this tool correctly. So right now it's saying it's going to go above the curve. So I could move that around depending on whatever I wanted. I could have it justified on one end. If I wanted this to fill the whole space, I would choose scale text to fill curve. And maybe I don't want it to be so big, but I'd want it in the middle. And maybe I want my text to stay upright. This would be pretty close, so that doesn't look great. We might have to do an offset distance of like 5. Not so much. Here, let's increase text spacing. There we go. All right, so that's good. We'd have to go back through and connect. The E would be the only issue on this one. As we went through, we could delete that if we were done and ready. I'll show you one more thing about text. If I want to distort this thing, I'll stick with a bounding box and apply, and I can drag this out to give it different variations. I could even bump in on some sections, and it's going to give some very different feels on how this might be. If you wanted to have that inverted, we can also use some of these mirrors. And if I wanted to create a copy, I can make sure that's checked. I could say, flip it to the top. And there's a second one if I wanted to have one on the right-hand side. If I wanted to rotate one of these texts a specific degree, instead of just dragging, which you can do, you can drag this how you want. You could do a very specific angle. Maybe 180 degrees. There it is. I'm going to delete that one. And we're going to leave this space. We're going to import an image. So I'm going to start with a bitmap and take this bobcat here. We're going to move it up and we're going to shrink it down. Let's actually scale it more specifically in transform object. We're going to go to the second one. Set size, and we are going to make sure it's linked, and we're only going to go with something that's going to be like 4 inches. If you have a vector already, that's what this one's for. That has all the shapes already in. There's some great sources to find good things. But if you've got a simple silhouette like this, we use a bitmap. This is a PNG, I believe. It's already imported it. I'm going to go down to trace bitmap, and I just want the gray parts. So I'm going to click and it's the gray details that I'm looking for. If I chose this one, then it would just give me very little useful information here. I think I'm liking most of the grays, and that's good enough. I'll have to hit preview and apply. And now what I have is a vector line that this would be easy to plasma cut out. With these tools, you can create a whole